Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. On this channel, we talk about problems people face in their day-to-day lives. Let's start with a video.
My husband has changed. When we got married, he was so gentle and attentive. He would do anything to make sure that the family was okay. We started a business together after we got married. I was a medical practitioner, though I had a knack for business, so I invested a lot of money into it and I gave him all my ideas. The plan was that I would still work as a doctor since I just started my residency at the time, but would retire early. I helped with marketing and publicity. We were the power couple because together we could do anything we wanted to. With so much dedication and hard work, the business picked up and was doing pretty amazing. And at that time, my practice was picking up too. So I lessened my grip on our business and let him run it. It seemed to be doing well because he had more money. We would go on vacations at least twice a year, and when we got kids, they joined us as well. We were a very happy family. My husband and I have been married for the past 10 years, and in those times it wasn't a bed of roses. We have had to jump through many hurdles and fight to remain together and love each other unconditionally. Marriage is not easy if you don't know how to forgive easily. I learned that the hard way. When you live with someone and are constantly in their personal space and they in yours, it's not only love that keeps you together. In fact, love doesn't cut it. It's all the other virtues that you should have imbibed, like patience and not keeping grudges. Your patience would be tested. He did the same for me too, because I know that I am a handful, and you have to be able to manage me to live with me. Recently, I noticed that he was always frowning and was distant. He would snap at every little thing. We were living like housemates who didn't like each other instead of husband and wife who loved each other. It became worrisome for me because in our 10 years of marriage, we always talked through things. It was key that we communicated with each other when something was up. It was my husband who taught me this because at the beginning of our relationship, I wouldn't speak whenever something wasn't right. But you could tell that I wasn't okay. But that didn't move our relationship forward like he explained. I would have to speak up because he wasn't in my head and wouldn't know what the problem was. I finally learned it, so I'm surprised that for the first time since we met, he's doing the same thing. Something is definitely wrong and he is agitated and gets angry easily, but he isn't communicating, and when I ask him, he always tells me not to worry about it. It was not possible not to worry. I had thought of different scenarios to figure out what was going on, and the suspense was driving me crazy. I even thought the worst. Maybe he was sick, but I dismissed it immediately. What I decided to do was support him through whatever was going on, and maybe this time he wanted to handle it alone. Though it was painful for me that he didn't bring me into what was going on with him. He was rarely at home now and came back very late. Most of the time the kids were already asleep and they left early in the morning for school when he was still sleeping because he slept very late. Our children missed him a lot, but I had to give an excuse for him. One of my daughters asked me if Daddy was okay and if we were fighting. That broke my heart into pieces. I gave her a warm smile and reassured her that everything was okay. That day, my husband didn't go anywhere and he seemed to be doing better. He told me that he wanted to speak to me when I was back from work. I was so curious that I left work early. He told me that our business was going down, and we had been struggling for some time now, but he didn't want to bother me. He said that our lifestyle may have to change to accommodate it at least until it picks up again. He also told me that the many gifts and vacations would have to stop, and we would have to manage ourselves very tightly. I reminded him that we are in the marriage together, and I would do anything to support him. Plus, I work too, and I had initially footed some bills on my own until he insisted that I shouldn't, because he wanted to take care of me. Things seemed to be more civil with us now, since he told me what was going on. I cut down on all our expenses as a family and made sure that we were in the green zone, so that if it happened that I had to foot all the bills for the month, I would be able to do so comfortably. Because I also own the business, I asked to see our books so I could know how bad things had gotten. He kept changing the subject every time I brought it up. He was hiding something, but I didn't know what it was. We got into fights because he wouldn't come clean about the company, and that really pissed me off. I had this gut feeling that I couldn't shake off. It didn't feel good at all. I noticed even the slightest things, so it was weird to me that when his perfumes finished recently, he got new ones, and they were more expensive than the ones he used before. My husband wasn't one to waste money. In fact, between the two of us, I was most likely the one to do that. He always saved up and spent only what he could afford, so I expected him to buy cheaper perfumes since he kept going on about how we had to manage our finances. There were some other things I noticed that didn't add up. So one day, I went to the office when he traveled for a business trip and asked to see the records. But the accountant told me that my husband specifically gave instructions not to show me. That had never happened before because I always had access, and I rarely checked the records because I believed whatever he said to me. I decided to hire a private investigator to find out what was really going on. I asked around for a good private investigator and did my extensive research. I found one that I thought was a good fit. We met and I explained my concerns to him. I told him that he needed to be discreet because I didn't want anyone finding out what I was doing, especially my husband. He went to work on it and told me that our business was doing better than it ever did before. And in fact, the company recently got a huge contract. So why was my husband lying? That's what I really needed to find out. I spoke to the investigator again and asked him to find out what was going on with my husband, who was now going on more trips than I could count. Before, he didn't work during the weekends, but now things were different. He would either say he had a short trip to go on or he had work. It was like he only came home to bathe and change up his clothes, and next thing he was gone again. The investigator did not find much after a week, so I told him to do more digging, and thank God I did. When we met again, the investigator asked me about a business. The name wasn't familiar to me, and I didn't know anything about that business. I almost got angry, thinking he was just beating around the bush because he had not come up with anything. He calmed me down and told me that if I have never heard of the business, then he'd just solved the puzzle. Apparently, my husband had been siphoning funds to that business, which started about 3 years ago. That was the shock of my life because it meant that my husband was trying to steal all the money. If he wasn't telling me about the business and wouldn't give me access to the records of our own business, it meant that he was intentionally stealing money from me. I had trusted him too much. Like I said before, I am a practicing doctor, and at the beginning we both invested equally into the business, but I left the day-to-day running to him since I didn't want to quit my medical practice yet. When he came back from his latest trip, I confronted him about it. He seemed startled at first, and then he denied it. He accused me of trying to bring up something out of nothing. I had documents to show that the company was indeed real and had been running for the last 3 years. Yes, I was very trusting, especially because he is my husband, but I wasn't going to let him cheat me, and since he wasn't coming clean on his own, I got the authorities involved. The court ordered our business to be audited. It was found that the records have been tampered with for a very long time, even before he started moving it into his personal business 3 years ago. I have been living with a cheat. It made no sense to me why he would try to take money for himself. I literally gave him control over the business to run how he saw fit. The least he could have done was to be honest with me. I would have supported him if he wanted to go into another business. I am all for expansion. But this was even way more than taking money. He was willing to make his family suffer because of greed. We had completely changed our lifestyle to accommodate financial strain. Our kids were not used to it, and it got to me every time I denied them something they were used to having. I was asked if I wanted him to pay back all the money that he stole and if I wanted to press charges so he would go to jail. I decided against it. I told them the amount I wanted back, which was not close to the amount he had stolen over the years, and asked that I became the sole owner of our company while he takes his other company. He had done enough damage, though it was a relief that our business was still doing fine. I decided to leave my medical practice and run the business. It was my dream to retire early from medicine, though I wish it were in more favorable circumstances, but I would figure it out. As for our marriage, I don't believe in divorce, and I am capable of forgiving him. We would just have to rebuild our marriage, and it would only be if he is willing to. NTA, your husband is greedy. I can't believe he put the strain on you and your kids while he was stealing your money. YTA for trusting too much. You don't give anyone that much power over your business. You trusted whatever he told you and didn't check the books. That is why he could steal from you, because he felt that you would never find out. By the way, I would have asked him to return all the money he took and send him to jail, but I see you have a kind heart.
Next story.
I married my husband when my SD, Lee, was 10, and we all moved into a home I purchased prior to the marriage. My husband parented from guilt, Disney dad, as her mother didn't really come around until her teen years. She was raised very differently than my kids, 2 from my first marriage and later 1 together with my husband. And after about 2 years of marriage, I had to step back from taking a parental role with her due to conflict. When she was 14, her mother moved back into town and started spending time with her consistently, basically being a best friend who let her do anything. When my husband finally tried to lay down rules at age 15, it led to a blowout, and she moved in with her mom. We were against this because her mom was, and still is, an unstable situation, but couldn't really stop her. She has never spent a night in our house since, about 1.5 years now. Although would still meet up with her dad a few times a month for lunch, dinner, and stop by on holidays. From what he said, her mother would constantly kick her out for the night after arguments, throw her clothes away, and do other toxic things. And before his death, he claimed she wanted to come back but didn't want to hurt her mom. 6 months ago, my husband was killed in an accident. It threw our world upside down and affected all of our kids deeply. I saw Lee occasionally for the planning of the funeral, executing his estate, etc., but otherwise did not hear much from her and did not reach out after the initial call, except to inform her of events and information. I just recently sold the house. As my kids want a fresh start, we will stay in the same school district, but are moving across town. When packing, I realized Lee still had some things here in her old room and sent her a message offering to drop them off. When she realized we were selling the house and moving, she showed up and made a scene, accusing me of erasing her father, accusing me of not caring about him at all, and then demanded to know if I was going to have a room for her at the new house. I was shocked by this. We don't have much of a relationship and are not close. She seemed angry and devastated, and after a few choice words, drove off. I got a call from my husband's sister a few hours later, raging at me and accusing me of leaving her behind. But from what my perspective is, she didn't live with us before, and I'm not sure why she would start now. AITA? Your stepdaughter has problems and expects you to keep the house as a shrine to her father. She's young, troubled, and grieving, but the truth of it is she's not your problem anymore. I think it was a very kind of you to reach out to her about her things, but she doesn't see things that way and acted out. Sad situation. This poor child is hurting. She recognizes now how much she needed her father. Legally, you have absolutely no rights to her. Her mother, no matter how irresponsible, is her sole guardian. However, I see nothing wrong with you opening your door and allowing your SD the opportunity to visit her sibling in your new home. She is a member of the family, regardless of the past. Use this as a chance for both of you to heal. She needs a stable adult in her life. Completely rejecting her is an move.
Next story.
I was in fast food. I've had this job for 6 years, and I've always struggled to be on time. A few months in, I was made a manager. There always needs to be a manager in the building, but at that location, it made no difference if I was late. There were always multiple managers there. And then I was transferred to my current location. It's smaller and has a lot fewer managers. If I was late, someone would be waiting for me to show up so they could leave. After about a week, I sat down with my manager, Eliza, and we made a deal. My schedule was changed so that all of my shifts started an hour earlier. So I had 9-hour shifts instead of 8, and there was a guaranteed 1 hour overlap between me and the person before me. And it worked wonderfully. Even being regularly late, I still had the smoothest transitions because of that overlap, and nobody was inconvenienced. The manager before me would also sometimes be late to leave early, which everyone, in particular Eliza, who was salaried, enjoyed. Eliza even tried to convince the others working my shift to do that as well, but they refused. So it's still an 8-hour shift, with only me working 9 hours. 2 months ago, Eliza got transferred. We got a new manager, John. I don't know how the transition goes, but I assume that even if he was made aware of it, he would not be willing to continue my deal from before. I've had a second job now for 3 months and easily work through my lateness issues there. Tardiness isn't punished there, but makes the job much more difficult. The work starts on time, whether you're there or not. And I felt like I could do fine with that at my main job as well, as long as we could go back to the 8-hour shifts. But when we got to our first schedule made by John, I was still given a longer shift, with an hour earlier start time. I honestly preferred it this way, mostly because it allows me to stress a lot less about when I get there. John seems to like it that way too. He regularly leaves early on my days, so I see no need to bring it up with him. But I'm being told by the other managers and even some crew that John complains constantly to them about my lateness. Am I the a-hole for not being on time until my manager addresses it with me? YTA, and I have zero respect for someone who's habitually late to the point that their supervisor had to come up with what is, frankly, a ridiculous method of coddling you so that your tardiness wouldn't have a direct impact on other people. Like, serious question, is there something wrong with you such that you are physically incapable of being on time? Or are you just selfish and entitled? You're an adult. Adults show up to work when they're scheduled, not when they feel like it. I'm not sure where you got the notion that you're too important to have to show up on time, but it's a major character flaw. So, you made your shift an hour longer because you're always late? You're still late, but because your shift starts sooner, it's not as big a deal? So you're just late on purpose? Because that makes no sense. If your job starts an hour earlier and you get there late, but not so late as to cause trouble, then why couldn't you get there on time prior to the schedule change? This makes zero sense to me. YTA, though.